Peter, his wife Dodie Ann, and their children are slaves on a cotton plantation in 1863. When he finds out he has been sold to a new owner, he prays with his family until the white men come to take him away. Peter ignores the kids' pleas and tries to fight back by screaming and struggling against their grip. But the men don't think twice about pointing their guns at Dodie Ann, and Peter stops in his tracks and agrees to get on the cart on his own. Unfortunately, the men now want to get back at him, so they still hit and dragged him. Peter and a bunch of other slaves are moved in a cage and through bars as if they were cattle. Peter tells his crying children that he will come back for them one day, and they try to run after him. After a long time on the road, they get to their new place of work, which is a railroad construction site. Things are 100 times worse here than they were in the plantations. As a warning, the entrance is decorated with the heads of slaves who didn't do what they were told. They sleep in cages, and even if they are good and work hard, their white masters won't think twice about hitting them or calling them names. Even worse, they use Bible verses to explain why they did what they did. There are also many wild dogs that are sent after slaves who try to escape. When a slave does something wrong, sometimes they just get whipped, sometimes they are shot in the middle of the field, and sometimes Fassel, the boss, will brand them right in the face. Fassel keeps two slaves, Harrington and Knowles, in his right hand. They were both bought as slaves, but they were chosen to be guards because they were good hunters. Peter tries to be good, but even when he tries to help his friend Gordon up when he falls, he gets yelled at for doing something that isn't working. One night, after all the slaves are put back in their cages, they have to watch as John is thrown in while wiggling in pain because his cheek is burned. Thomas, a slave, is shaking with fear. Peter tries to calm him down by telling him to think about his family and that this just works. He also says that God is always watching over them, but John laughs at him because it's clear that God doesn't care about them. Peter doesn't say anything back, but he stays calm and tells John he will pray for him. Peter hears two white guards talking about some very important news at a later time. Lincoln has set the slaves free, and now those who were able to get away are all running to Baton Rouge to find help. A guard interrupts the conversation when he sees that Thomas made a mistake with the food and wants to punish him. But Peter stands up for him and says he's just a kid. The guard hits him and then pulls out his gun and points it at Peter, ready to kill him for being so rude. Fassel stops him, though, because Peter's attitude has caught his attention. Later, when Peter is back in the cage, Fassel tells him he's his god and Peter is now his dog. Peter tells Fassel that if that's the case, he should be given the same meat as the dogs. At that moment, Fassel just laughs, but the next day, he puts Peter in chains and makes him kneel in front of him while his dog barks and growls at Peter. Now that there are only a few inches between them, the dog has made Peter remember what he sent. Later, at lunch, Peter tells the other slaves about Lincoln and Baton Rouge, which they could reach after 5 days of walking through the swamp. Some of the slaves are hesitant because it was not easy to live in the swamps. But when Peter tells them that they probably won't live here either, a few men back him up. Now, all they have to do is wait until the right time to run away. Later, a slave dies while working, and the guards make Peter drag him to the pit, where they throw all the bodies together. Some white deserters should be digging, but as soon as they see Peter, they say a black man should do it instead. So, Peter gets a shovel and fills in the hole. Peter realizes that this is the perfect chance to pull off his plan, so he waits patiently for an explosion to happen on the field and then jumps on the guards to kill them with a shovel, steal a knife, and run away. When the other slaves and deserters see this, they take the chance to run away. Along the way, they hit a few guards, which gives John the chance to steal a gun. Other guards sound the alarm and start shooting the runners right away, trying to kill as many of them as they can before they get lost in the woods. Fassel also shoots, killing the deserters. He doesn't like that Peter got away with it, so he tells Harrington, Knowles, and the dogs to go after him. Peter is able to get together with 3 of his friends, and he leads them through the forest by listening for danger. They find the swamps in the end, and most of the team has no trouble getting through. But Thomas stops moving when he sees the crocodiles, which lets the dogs catch up to him. After the animals have done enough damage, Fassel calls them back and asks where the group is going. Thomas refuses to say this makes it difficult to reach an agreement. He will let Thomas go if Thomas tells him where the others are going. Thomas is scared, but he tells them what he knows, and they let him go into the swamp. Fassel shoots him as soon as he turns around, and the crocodiles eat him. Peter, John, and Gordon finish crossing the swamp without getting hurt. Peter thinks they should go through the other swamps, but John won't listen to anyone and decides to take the horse trail. With the gun he stole, he feels like he can stay safe. Gordon wants to go wherever Peter goes, but Peter thinks that if they split up, it will be harder to find them. So, after Peter tells him to follow the sound of Lincoln's guns, Gordon goes his own way through the woods. After that, Peter starts going his own way, only to find that a bullet hit his leg and caused it to bleed. After all, he needs to do something soon, or the dogs will smell blood. First, though, he needs to run for a while to get away from Fassel. A short time later, Peter comes across a white family's house where they have slaves. First, Peter takes a branch from a tree and ties it around his wound to stop the bleeding. Then he stays hidden behind a pile of logs and sneaks around, so he can get some water from the pump and see the clothes hanging from a rope. Peter runs across the garden and steals a shirt before running into the forest, which is a big risk. But one of the family's kids sees him and rings a bell to let everyone know. Fassel hears the sound and follows it to the house, where the family tells him where Peter went. Peter is running as fast as he can, and the only time he stops is to use the shirt he stole to bandage his wound. After a few seconds, he takes off the bloody shirt and puts it in a trunk for the dogs to find. While he hides under the swamp water, Fassel and his men fall for the trick and move down the road, thinking Peter has crossed the swamp. But he comes out after a camp for the night and eat the crocodile for dinner, which makes Harrington say that Peter is very skilled. Fassel scolds him right away and tells him what his father taught him about being responsible. If you give black people just a little bit of something, they will want more and take their jobs and land. The next morning, Peter kept running, making sure that mud and animal waste covered his body. It means that flies are always around him, but it helps hide his scent. When he has to cross another swamp, he thinks about his family and prays to his Lord to keep the fear of the animals at bay. When the sun suddenly shines on him, he takes it as a sign, while Fassel splits his group up to cover more ground. Peter is lucky to find an empty treehouse with clean water and some food still inside. There are also some hot coals, so Peter uses them to heat his knife so that he can close the cut on his leg. After that, he puts the coals on the empty bucket and takes them with him as he climbs a tree to throw smoke at a beehive. This scares away the bees, so Peter can get some honey. Fassel sees the smoke and starts to ride toward it, but Peter has already left. The treehouse also has a boat that a snake is hiding in. Peter uses a branch to move the snake out of the way, then jumps into the boat and sails away while enjoying the honey. Dodie's master comes up to her and tells her that he sold her and that she'll be gone in 2 days. Her children can't go with her, though, because her new master will marry them off. Dodie is very hurt by the news, but she still wants to wait here for her husband to come back, so she makes a very drastic choice to avoid being sold. She goes to one of the machines used to make cotton and puts her hand inside it, acting like she's in trouble. Let's go back to Fassel. He uses his dog's nose to find the treehouse and keeps track of Peter's direction as he crosses the river. Peter moves quickly into the woods, where he is surprised to run into John again. John is angry that the white men will now also come after him. Peter says he isn't being followed and shows John how to hide his scent, but John doesn't listen, and they keep running. After just a second, they heard the dogs barking and ran to hide. John climbs to the top of a tree while Peter hides in an empty trunk. Still, the dogs follow John's scent, making it easy for Fassel and his men to find him. John won't come down, so Fassel shoots him and makes him fall. He then uses violence to get John to tell him about Peter, but John still won't talk. Fassel decides to take his head and give it to Harrington and Knowles so that they can bring it back to camp as a message. Peter closes his eyes so he doesn't have to see his friend John die. Then he prays for John's soul. After waiting a few hours to get away from Fassel, he comes out of the trunk when it starts to rain, only to find out how they killed John, which shakes him to the core. Even though he is sad, he forces himself to keep going. Suddenly, he sees a group of horses running by, one of which is on fire. Peter goes in the direction they came from and finds a house on a plantation, but everything is on fire and all the white people are dead. It looks like the slaves here also heard what Lincoln said and took action on their own. Peter walks slowly through the house with his knife in hand, just in case. When he comes to the dining table, he throws caution to the wind and dives right into the food and wine to feed his tired body. He doesn't stop until he hears a strange sound coming from upstairs. He follows it until he finds a dying girl stuck under a harp that she keeps playing to get help. Peter saves her right away, takes her outside, and sets her down on a table while he goes to get some water. The girl is afraid, though, so she makes him stay and gives him her cross necklace. Peter takes it because he knows she needs a prayer that God will be with her. He's so busy that he doesn't hear Harrington coming until it's too late. Peter has to drop his knife and move away from the girl or get shot. The girl dies as soon as Peter leaves her, and he is so angry that he is willing to turn around and use the cross as a stake to kill Harrington. Knowles shows up at the same time, but Peter is quick on his feet and grabs Harrington's gun to shoot him. Knowles tries to tell Peter that Fassel might accept someone who can kill a crocodile into his group, but Peter calls him the worst kind and leaves him to die. Peter runs into the cotton fields for cover when he hears Fassel barking toward him. When the dog gets too close, Peter shoots it. Fassel finds the body in the end, which makes him want to catch Peter even more. The next morning, Peter comes to a beach where the bodies of white men who died in fights with Lincoln's army have been left. They don't have any food for him to take, but Peter can see the ships and hear the cannons, which show that Lincoln's men are close by. Peter starts running again, happy at the thought of finally being free. But all of a sudden, a horse appears next to him, and he is pushed down with a few hits. Fassel is the one who gives Peter some of the meat he had asked for earlier and tells him to beg. Fassel pulls out his gun and tells Peter that he is his god because Peter won't listen, but before he can pull the trigger, someone else shoots him. Peter tells the falling body that he's not a god before turning to meet his rescuers, Lincoln's native guard, led by Lieutenant Q. Peter's body finally gives in to exhaustion and hunger, so the soldiers take him to the infirmary tent at their camp in Baton Rouge. Because the cut on Peter's leg is infected, the nun nurse makes him reeve, and for a few days, all Peter does is think about his family. Once Peter feels better, he goes to see one of the soldiers to get his new papers as a free man. He has to make up some information that he doesn't know, though. He can like his AG and look for his family, which is a shame. But the white soldiers take advantage of the fact that the slaves are technically stolen goods and give them two options: work on the federal farms or join the army. Peter doesn't want to keep doing what he's told, but a soldier convinces him that joining the army will help him save his family and be free for good. After that, Peter finds out that the army has also found Gordon, who is hurt but still alive. Peter is happy to see him, but it hurts to tell him what happened to John. Then Peter goes to see Q to get his uniform, but before he does, he is asked if he would be willing to help the cause by posing for a picture. Peter isn't sure what to think, but Q says the white photographers are safe and of good intentions. It turns out that these men are taking pictures to show the world what slavery is really like. Peter agrees to let them take a picture of his bear's back, which shows the marks of hundreds of whippings. Next, Peter is taken to see the general, who asks him what he knows about the enemy's building of a railroad. After Peter tells the general everything he knows, he makes him look at his picture and says that those scars mean he didn't follow orders, which isn't a good trait to have in the army. He tries to take Peter away, but Peter fights back and says that those scars mean he's been hit a lot, but he's never stopped fighting, which is also important for a soldier. At dawn, Q takes Peter and all of his soldiers to the trenches. There, he gives a heartfelt speech to remind them that they are fighting for freedom. Many soldiers die from enemy fire while they are still marching, but the group doesn't let it stop them. Instead, they don't think twice before joining the fight. Soon, there is fire all around them, and Peter is hit by an explosion that knocks him out for a few minutes while he lies in a puddle. As soon as he wakes up, he drags his sore body through the mud to keep helping. He shoots at the enemy whenever he has the chance and prays for any dying friend he sees along the way. Hugh died in the fight. And in the end, Peter also finds a hurt Gordon. Seeing his friend in so much pain and fear makes him leave his hiding place and run toward the enemy. His goal was to stop the cannons from firing. And because all of the soldiers look up to him and follow him, the native guard is able to beat their enemies and win the battle. The army goes to every plantation to free the slaves now that the war is over. When they get to the house where Peter used to work, everyone is shocked and can't believe what they have heard. When they realize their freedoms are real, their mood quickly changes to happiness. Peter starts looking for his family after seeing his former master die at the hands of the law. When he can't find them, he almost goes crazy because he can't find them. But when he starts to pray quietly, he looks to his side and lets God lead him to his wife and kids, who run up to him and give him a big hug. The picture of the real Peter became a famous part of history and has been seen many times all over the world. Because of Lincoln's proclamation, more than 400,000 black people were able to escape to freedom in 1863. By 1865, almost 4 million slaves in the United States were given their freedom. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can see more videos like this. Thanks for coming to watch.